estate also has to notify the Department of Public Welfare. I'm going to let Leslie talk a little about that. Do that, Leslie.
Well, thank you, Dennis. The administratrix, I'll use the female form for you, Dennis, or executrix, would need to notice the Department of Public Welfare just to make sure that there are no liens outstanding that would need to be repaid from the estate. So it should be a lien out there. Also, if the person was over age, shall be a lien out there. Also, if the person was over age 55 and was receiving medical assistance, then the Pennsylvania Estate Recovery Act would potentially apply, and again, there just might be a medical assistance lien. So we always notice the Department of Public Welfare as a matter of course to be sure that there's nothing outstanding.
And also if there's a special needs trust?
Yes, that is right. As we discussed in some of our sessions earlier, depending on what type of special needs trust a decedent may have had, you may have to repay the state again for medical assistance provided to the disabled person.
Sarah, would you mind talking about why do we have to notify Social Security? Don't they know when everybody dies?
Well, you're not entitled to Social Security once you die, so you want to make sure that payment's stopped. And actually, the funeral homes used to do that, but they don't do that as often, so you just want to double check. And there's an 800 number that you can call in and type in the person's Social Security number, and it's actually, you don't have to talk to a soul. You can just let them know that somebody has died. And a lot of times the message will come back that we've already been notified of that. Back to the Department of Public Welfare also. When you go to sell real property out of an estate, a lot of times the mortgage companies will want a letter that just verifies that there are no outstanding liens. So even if you know that the person never was on any sort of public assistance, you want to have that letter for the mortgage company of the potential buyer.
And if you don't notify DPW and they have a lien, and you're the administrator or the executor, they're going to come after you. I mean, they want their money. If you've been on medical assistance or you're distributing a special, are not going to just say, oh, no harm, no foul. They consider it a lot of harm and it's 5 fouls, and they want their money. And we'll look at, as we get towards the end of the list, of some of the mechanisms that an administrator and administratrix can use to try to get money back from people that have distributed it. But that's not a letter you want to write or a call you want to make. You know, I sent you $100,000 6 months ago, but I forgot to notify the Department of Public Welfare, and they have a 75 paying, and I forgot about it. So, you know, it's one of those letters and calls you don't want to make. Notifying insurance companies and annuity payers. Well, there's a number of insurance companies, and I'm going to throw in my 2 cents and then let Sarah comment. Obviously, life insurance companies need to be aware of the death. Any insurance company that's insuring real estate, a vehicle, and you got to decide what you're going to do with that vehicle too. That a vehicle may be something that you want to transfer fairly quickly, because if a vehicle just sits there, it can lose value and can, it's receiving money from an annuity. Whoever is paying that annuity has a right to know that that decedent isn't to receive it anymore, and you need to obviously look at that annuity to see, is there a death benefit that goes to someone? If it's a guaranteed term of years, let's say the decedent bought an annuity 25 years ago, but it had 30 years guaranteed, then you need to see who gets the last 5 years. It may be the estate, it may be another designated beneficiary. What did I miss there?
I think you hit them off. Medical insurance, you want to make sure that they know that, you know, when the date of death was, so that they'll look for final bills if there was an illness involved.
Valuing the assets. We've already You send them a letter with a death certificate, with a short certificate saying, please give us the date of death value. We talked about things like bank accounts, stocks, things held by financial institutions, and they're typically pretty good about sending you that sort of information. There are other assets that are more difficult to value. For example, automobiles. Now, my understanding is they'll usually take the Kelley Blue Book value, Department of Revenue. The real estate. Each county has its own assessment process, and different counties are more or less up to date in terms of giving true current market value to properties. And there's a couple ways of valuing that asset. You can get someone who's a real estate appraiser to come in and tell what that date of death value actually was. And typically you're going to do that if you believe that for some reason the actual value was less than it would be if you used the valuation that the county uses. Could you speak to that county valuation process at all and the common level ratio?
Well, there's a common level ratio that each county has. Yeah, there's a common level ratio that each county has that you multiply your assessed value by in order to come up with a fair market value, and it's not too far off. But a lot of times it's just as easy to find a real estate agent to give you a fair market value assessment of, some comps in your neighborhood that have sold recently in order to put that value on the return. If you get a full-blown appraisal done, the Department of Revenue or the IRS would like a copy of that. But if you're just getting a letter from a real estate agent, they want it signed by the agent so that they have a checks and balances again of, where you're coming up with this value.
What other assets do we need to talk about? Automobile, real estate, sometimes collections. You have collections, contents of the home. Contents of the home are usually not significant unless there are collections. But if you have something of intrinsic value, it has to be appraised, and there are companies that attorneys and on behalf of executors can hire to do those kinds of appraisals. Obviously, things in the safe deposit box are going to be subject to appraisal as well.
Or if you have insurance riders on tangibles, they will look for that. That's a question that you have to answer. If you had insurance on any tangible personal property or collections, they will want to know what you insured, a painting or a piece of porcelain or whatever you might have. They will want to know that.
Thank you. Send letters regarding valuation of employment benefits to decedent's employer. What are we talking about there, Sarah?
If they were receiving a pension, and a lot of times pensions from companies will continue on for the life of the surviving spouse, you will want to know what that value was and pick that up on your death tax returns.
Arrange for real estate and tangible personal property appraisals. We've talked about the real estate, we've talked about that just a few moments ago, because obviously the taxing agencies are going to expect to know what the value is and have some proof of it. Collect life insurance if payable to the estate. This is something that I don't want to say it's not typical, but it's usually not where you're going to make life insurance payable, but there are exceptions. And one of the exceptions would be to fund what we call the credit shelter trust. Sometimes, especially when Leslie and I are doing estate planning, we see people who don't have a lot of assets. Surprising to me to see people that may only have even less than $100,000 in assets. But they sometimes have $4 or $5 million except life insurance. Sometimes it's insurance. Maybe, hey, their kids are sucking up all their liquid assets. I mean, that can happen. I see a number of smiles around the room from people who have that ATM machine feeling about them. But they have a lot of insurance because they have children who need to be cared for if they die. But that insurance is part of the federal estate tax estate. So you have a situation where it is necessary, in order to avoid federal estate tax, to sometimes put that life insurance into a credit shelter trust, which can allow each of the spouses to use their federal estate tax exemption. So if there is a situation like that where the life insurance is payable to the estate, then the executor or executrix has to take the lead in getting that assurance and make it payable to the estate, and to then place it into that, if it goes into a credit shelter trust, to open a trust account to get the trustee underway in terms of managing that estate.